Charles Bukowski, looked at through a modern lens, is one of the most problematic writers of the 20th century. But despite that fact, he's still my favorite poet.
The writer has no responsibility except to jack off in bed alone and type a good page.
I write poetry. I've been writing consistently since I was 13. And it's not corny or flowery or simple rhymey stuff. It's dirty and horny and full of regrets. Sometimes it's the kind of stuff that Charles Bukowski wrote about. Ever since a woman I was sleeping with gave me the massive gift of introducing me to her favorite poet, I found myself drawn to the gruff, drunken, weathered, ornery, horn dog writing of Charles Bukowski.
Talking about the whore who claims you owe her money? Or that guy who smiled too much, must have cleaned his teeth with piss?
I especially look to read him when I am single. But that young male draw that made Bukowski so famous is also worth holding up to the light to make sure it's not reinforcing sometimes misogynistic tendencies. Spoiler alert, it is. If you don't know Bukowski, he was born in Germany in 1920, raised in the United States by an abusive father.
My father's feet stank, and his smile was like a blaze of dog shit.
Bukowski rose to fame as an author and poet in the 1970s when he was around 50 years old, coming off a decade-long stint as a post office worker. The New Yorker once described him as a mythic roughneck, a figure out of a tall tale, brawler, gambler, companion of bums and whores, booze hound with an oceanic thirst. And from reading many of his books of poetry, I have to agree. He was quoted as saying he led a crappy life, which I think is why his fans respect him so much. He has no pretense. He wasn't angling for anything. The only thing he wanted in his life was to write poetry.
That's all that interests me, the next poem, the next f***ing line. What's past is past, I don't want to linger over it. If you can't write the next line, well, you're dead.
It's hard to relate to Charles Bukowski when you're happy and coupled up and living on a traditionally romantic path. Chuck is more for people who want to flounder around a little in their own filth and misery. But the reason why Bukowski's writing has connected with so many generations of men is that while misery loves company, it especially loves it when that company gets into a little bit of mischief. Bukowski's language is the opposite of what you expect from conventional poetry. He unveils nothing ornamental. There are no moon and star metaphors here. Bukowski is kind of the working man's Emerson, the Walt Whitman of neat whiskey, and every time I'm single and living a more individualized life, I love him more for it. Chuck is the kind of guy who will literally tell you that he has shit stains in his underwear too. And that's hilariously relatable. I have shit stains. I like to drink. I like to have sex. I like to feel grungy and sit in that feeling with folks who don't judge me, who don't think they're better than me. With Charles, you get portraits of outcasts, weirdos, drunks, and degenerates. Bukowski knows these people because he is these people. He's the kind of guy who will almost get fired from his job so he can get home in time to have sex with one of his multiple girlfriends. He's the kind of guy who is more comfortable at the racetrack than some serene mountaintop. And he's also the type of writer who dabbles in misogyny in ways that aren't the best. They're not a role model for modern masculinity.
What was your first woman?
Well, it was the 300-pound whore.
You could say he's a product of his time, sure, but he also is so beloved amongst men of the late 20th century and beyond because he models that type of masculinity that celebrates this lack of responsibility, a lack of integrity, and a general disposability of women. And yet, see, this is where I was gonna pivot the video to say Bukowski is still worth appreciating because this is how guys sometimes talk. They objectify. And women do it too. But after I did more research about Bukowski in the process of making this video, I had to completely change course. This video was formerly my attempt at separating the art from the artist. My attempt to address the special relationship I felt with a man's work while mostly skirting by the fact that he was an absolute menace to the women in his life and on the page. For every poem like Out of the Arms of One Love and Into the Arms of Another, out of the arm of one love and into the arms of another, I have been saved from dying on the cross by a lady who smokes pot, writes songs and stories, and is much kinder than the last. Which is great. There is a warm asses. I am an admirer of warm and young and no longer used mournful Mexican asses. What do you even do with that? For every funny libertine quote,
Well, it's nice to die of alcoholism. It's very glorious. But if you write dull shit, it doesn't do any good what you die from.
there is a dehumanizing or belittling one.
You think you're the last woman on earth that I can get?
Never haven't thought about it.
Yeah, well, you better start thinking.
And my emotional pivot in the middle of producing this video just goes to show that men, we can change our mind. We have the ability to back away from some invisible allegiance and say, I don't feel that way anymore. I've seen things and I can't have the same relationship with that guy. In my opinion, that's the manliest thing to do. You know what's not manly? Hitting a woman.
You think you walk out on me every night? You whore.
Or frequently describing women by their body parts or calling them whores. Bukowski's 1978 novel Women was researched by capitalizing on his growing fame and sleeping with as many women as he could.
One morning I had 3 of them sitting on this couch. The mailman came by. He asked me the next day, Hank, how do you do it? How do you get it? I said, the problem is not how you get them, it's how you get rid of them.
He was actually quoted as saying, I had to taste women in order to really know them, to get inside them. So I explored them as best I could, and I found human beings inside. Holy shit. I mean, usually misogynists aren't this blatant about believing that women don't count as people. What a cool guy. I started writing this essay thinking that I was going to be able to keep the art separated from the artist, thinking that I could reconcile this guy's philosophy and behavior because of the impact his work had on me. I will note, the expectation that an artist has to be morally perfect is completely unreasonable. And it also defeats the purpose of art. I mean, no one is morally perfect. No one behaves exactly to the rules in their own time or for later generations. But I do think there's a moral threshold that we need to have as a society when we look to famous artists as role models. And I have figured out my moral threshold. My role models can't treat people like second-class citizens or like objects in a way where he's consistently abusing or demeaning them. Pretty clear.
We're all rapists, we're all murderers. It's just, well, I'm not a murderer. It's just, can we get away with it?
Knowing that Bukowski behaved like this and still making a video heralding his work is like the writer's version of passive bystandership. I am not here to hold Bukowski up on any pedestals. I guess I'm just here to ask all of you, how do you compartmentalize the love you have for somebody's art when they are revealed to be a harmful person past your moral threshold? For Bukowski and me, it's going to be complicated for a while. Because in his work, there's this deeper sense of chasing an experience that I love. It portrays a man moving towards some sort of final scratching of an itch, some sort of glory, some sort of peace that he has chosen to find through vice, sex, and engaging with the mad characters that surround him. And that is very appealing to me. I don't want to be like Charles Bukowski, but sometimes we do feel the same things. And I don't know exactly what to do about that yet. Thank you so much for watching this, I guess, failed attempt at separating art from artist. If you enjoyed the video, please like it and subscribe to my channel, Real Feels.